Welcome to Laguna Podcast, an attempt at illustrating the lives and stories from the Texas outdoors. Today I sit down with a man who has allowed the speckled trout to consume his soul. Someone who is truly an example of a proper steward, conservationist, and aficionado of the speckled trout. This is my conversation with Christopher Bush. Before we get into it, is there anything that you would like for me to highlight so I can take a note of it now so I don't forget?
Nope.
Cool.
I think we're good.
All right. Well, with that being said, I have Mr. Speckled Truth in the chair, Christopher Bush. This is cool. I've wanted to do this for a while, even though you didn't think you were worth the trip or whatever, which was silly in and of itself. But whatever, we're here. I'm excited to do this. Would you like to introduce yourself and what you do before we get started?
Yeah, if you don't mind. So super humbled and honored that you came, but also too that you offered. And like I told you, and I still believe it to this day, is there are so many more people here in the Texas coast that are more deserving to be kind of in the limelight, put out there.
Then give me those names too after this.
Well, we've talked about it in Speckled Truth, where really we're walking in the footsteps of legends. You know, the Jay Watkins of the world, the David Rouseys of the world, the Cliff Webbs of the world, those guys that have really changed the game in terms of, one, not only how to target, big trophy trout, but really how to take care of them.
Yeah.
And so those are the guys who I'm walking in their footsteps for sure. Yeah.
And I don't disagree. I'd like to even be like, it's almost like they set a baseline as to how to act as a waterman and an aficionado of the species or just of the sport in general.
Yeah, no, 100%. So, mainly because it's the evolution of an angler. And so I know we're getting a little off topic, but it's really the evolution of an angler. And so we'll jump right into it. And so born and raised in South Louisiana.
Perfect, let's do it. Yeah.
I think it's a good segue, because I think everybody who's listening, who's a trout aficionado, who likes to target big fish, now who has maybe changed their evolution of their angling mindset to be a little bit more understanding of a resource and how to take care of it. They went from a catch, meat hauler, if you will, to maybe more of like a take what you need, release the rest. And we talked about that, but really born in South Louisiana, I didn't know anything different. And so I'm 44 and I'm a transplant to Texas by virtue of the military. And so been in 20 years and 3 months. I'll actually retire this year.
Congratulations.
And thanks, man. I appreciate it. And so it's brought me so many different places. But before all that, it started with literally the back of my dad's skiff and targeting trout. And anybody who knows my dad, he's always our first episode on our seasons in the Speckled Truth podcast, as long as he's alive.
Yeah.
And so he just left actually last week, and we've been really fortunate enough to have a very good father-son relationship. And his passion is truly trout, nothing else. And so growing up, navigating the Louisiana Delta, targeting just trout, everything else was merely bycatch. It was so fun, dude. And when you have a dad who's like that and really just instills that in you, and then aside from that, just immerses you in the Louisiana Delta, man, you can't help but formulate your own opinions in terms of beauty. And really the fishery of itself and really you start to understand now later in life that as you grow older, maybe it really wasn't about the fish. Maybe it wasn't about the trout, but I will say it was definitely a connecting theme, a connective tissue throughout the course of my life. So married, 3 kids, and getting back to the premise of the question, which is, we are walking in those footsteps of legends. And because Jay Watkins and Cliff Webb and David Rousey, they are the true trout legends, McBride, many others, because they saw, the pressure that was coming on the fishery. They maybe saw, some environmental factors that we're going to have on fisheries. And so they took a little bit more of a self-predicated approach to taking care of a fishery. So the Just Take 5 theme, I think when that Jay instituted
It's a while ago, right? Yes.
Yeah, right.
This episode is made possible by our friends over at Gordy & Sons Outfitters, located in Houston, Texas, and employing a team of experienced outdoorsmen specializing in fly fishing, hunting, and wing shooting. Gordy & Sons is sure to prepare you for success in the outdoors. Next time you find yourself prepping for a weekend getaway or a bucket list trip, be sure to give them a shout.
That was my pup.
Hey, Lucy.
Hey, Lucy Goose. That was important because he saw what was going on in the fishery. And so what he did is, he really had that mindset shift again from just having to sell trips, being a meat hauler, to then now, taking care of a fishery.
Make sure she doesn't step on the off button.
Go ahead. Hey, girl. So,
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
no, it's all good, man. But I say all that to say, man, those are the guys who are way more deserving.
For sure.
So
even though I agree, but I also don't fully agree, because I feel like someone like yourself who's brought so much attention again through your project is someone who in and of itself for that alone is more than well deserving to have their story told. Granted, at the end of the day, we're just having a conversation. So
yeah, sure.
With that being said, and I do want to get into some of the people who you think are extremely good stewards of this fishery, examples to follow in their footsteps, not to take exactly what you said and repeat it. But before we do all that, I want to start from the very beginning. I want to know your first memory in the outdoors, and I feel like it's going to be a story with your dad, so that's going to be kind of cool. I mean, I'm guessing anyways. But I would like to start there, and then I want to know your chronological progression as an outdoorsman or someone who's just passionate about speckled trout.
Yeah. So the first true memory I have fishing was fishing in Lafitte, Louisiana, back at Blue Point, which is like a little area just on the north side of the Penn. Mm-hmm. And I was probably, I don't know, maybe 6, I guess. And my mom was really she's a saint. She's a living saint. Mm-hmm. And my brother is 10 years older. My sister's 13 years older. And my brother and my sister, they had a lot more access to the outdoors when they were younger. My dad had a camp in Cocodrie. It was called Pawpaw's Palace. My grandfather was alive at the time. Mm-hmm. I didn't really know my grandparents. They had passed. I was a late in life baby from my mom and my dad. And so when I turned 6, my brother was 16. He had kind of started, playing really sports and stuff like that. And then, he was gearing up to go to college. That's when my mom's like, hey, you need to give Chris, the same opportunities you gave Kerry, my brother. And so he bought, we called it was a little 16-foot Wellcraft. It was called Get the Net in true Cajun fashion. Get the Net.
It's spelled G-I-T.
G-I-T-D-A-N-E-T. Yep, Get the Net. And it had a little 35 Emerald on it. And that was my access to really the Louisiana Delta. And so, earlier on, I grew up also too, we had, my dad had 30 acres of land in the Kiln, Mississippi to keep my brother really out of trouble out of New Orleans. And so I was fishing the farm ponds and stuff like that. When my mom saw that I loved to fish, that's when she's like, hey, you got to get this boat for this boy. And so back at Blue Point, I remember going with my dad, Mr. Tommy Dockan, who was a Napa rep because my dad was an auto mechanic. Mm-hmm. And we went and we caught a bunch of trout. And, I was still throwing a little red push button Zepco that I was, fishing the farm ponds with. And it was so fun. And that was about the first true memory I have of trout fishing. And so the evolution to that, it's never stopped, right? It's continued to progress. And he has a collage book. It's kind of funny. It's called Boats of Our Lives. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of boats in our lives. Everything, from, again, the original Get the Net. I had my first boat, which was called a Mullet Smasher. It was a 16-foot custom flat boat, Henkel's, all welded aluminum boat. And that was a boat that I bought $1,500 cash mowing lawns. And that was truly when the Louisiana Delta is at my fingertips. Yeah. Because he had sold the farm in Mississippi. And at that time, he and 3 other of his coworkers that he worked with in the automotive industry bought a camp in Port Sulphur, Louisiana, which was, we called it the Knack. And it was Nikki, Alvin, Charlie, and Keith. And it was right there in Martin's Lane. And you literally had a slip underneath the camp itself. And I lived down there, like 100%. I had my driver's license, and I could take my own boat. So, and it was before cell phones, just crazy. Because I don't know if I'd let my kids do that today, but literally launch a boat and basically hit Grand Bayou, and then all starting to explore. My only rule was kind of like, living in the neighborhood, just be back before dark.
Yeah.
And so, man, just that's when you're given that opportunity to just really have the Louisiana Delta at your disposal, man, you start to really just fall in love with it. And that's where the true love of the sport, and certainly the true love for trophy, or not trophy trout, but just trout fishing in general. That's really the genesis of it.
When did you have your first experience handling, fighting, losing, missing, or seeing a trophy trout?
Yep. 100% can tell you that as well. I actually wrote a blog post about it originally, and it was the day that never happened. That's what I called it.
Interesting.
Yep. And it was, man, it was so cool. My dad and I, Mr. Alvin, no, I take that back. My dad and I went, and I had finished finals at LSU, and I'd purposely finished them early. And so it was like Tuesday. It was right around his birthday. His birthday's on May the 12th. And I came home to surprise him. And we just had like a late spring, like cold front come through. Mm-hmm. And we used to wade fish the Barrier Islands from really Caminata Pass, which is the mouth of basically Barataria Bay, all the way over to Shell Island Bay, or Shell Island Pass, right outside of Bastion Bay on Empire. And there's a series of like passes in between and beaches and cuts that a lot of people didn't really do. But, knowing that, and we loved to wade fish the surf and wade fish the inside, and not a lot of people did. I mean, there were sharks and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So getting back to this story, I go and I show up and I'm like, hey, brother, let's go to the camp. And he's like, I can't. I'm like, what? He's like, man, look at the wind. It's blowing. It's crazy. And I said, man, it's blowing offshore. Let's, that if the water's clean, and if it's going to clean up, it's going to clean up there first. It's a leeward bank. Obviously, it's a north, it's facing south. And he's like, all right, man, I'll call him Alvin. He was his coworker. And he's like, I'll see if I can get the next couple of days off. So anyway, he ended up doing it. The whole way we're driving down there, man, it's like 40 degrees. And that's the first time I've ever worn waders.
Really?
Yeah, in brutal transparency. And
that was in your college years. Dude, that's crazy.
I know. Because we, when we wade fish the surf, it was typically, warm enough to wet wade. Uh-huh. And so I'm like, dude, we're just going to have to put on the waders. And anyway, we hit like 3 or 4 sandbars running Grand Bayou Canal, which basically goes from the camp all the way down. And then we took a right, Bayou Herties, and then Tony's Canal all the way back. And we snuck back through Bay Joe Wise, and we're running a back levee canal to the Barrier Islands. And those bars shift every year. Now they're completely filled in through a series of projects that they have now. So it's not even there anymore.
And is it a good thing or a bad thing?
Well,
you'll get there.
We'll get there. Yeah. But dude, we hit like 3 or 4 sandbars, pushing them off. Finally, we get there, and lo and behold, Darren Angelo, who owned at the time Delta Marina in Empire, Louisiana, was there in his like little, 19-foot hunter green champion backcountry flats boat. Uh-huh. And we're like, what the hell, man? We took all this effort to get out here, and we wanted to wade fish, and we're at Chelan Pass. So anyway, we pull up, and Darren was like walking back to the boat. Man, you catch them? Oh man, bunch of bull redfish. And that's typical for South Louisiana. Is you typically have a real strong run of bull redfish on a beach before the big trout come in, or trout come in general. Anyway, we fished. The wind started to kind of taper off. The color of the water got green. I still see it to this day. And I was throwing a chrome and blue Top Dog, not the Top Dog Junior, but the original Top Dog. Mm-hmm. And my dad was throwing a smoke grub with a chartreuse head. and we were just railing a redfish. And man, after about like 2 hours or so, finally, fish exploded on. I'm like, okay, it's just another redfish. And that's when it was probably about 4 or 5 pounds, if I had to guess at that point. And I'm like, oh my God. And that was certainly one of the biggest trout I'd ever seen in my life at that point. Because Louisiana, I mean, you can catch 100 trout in an hour, but to catch big fish, it takes a lot different effort, And so we sat there for, like 3 hours. And my dad, I gave him one. We ended up keeping 42. This is because, again, we didn't know anything. This is really what prefaced Speckled Truth. But
humble beginnings.
Oh, yeah. We kept 42 of the biggest trout I would ever have kept. And they were probably somewhere between in the 4 and 7 pound range. And I caught my first 7 pounder that day. Yep.
Oh, my God.
Yep.
Damn.
And that was when I was like, this is incredible. And to see the size of those fish comparative to like a 13 or 14 inch fish that we'd catch in the marsh. At that point, I was bitten by that bug, and I had played college baseball, and on road trips, I would always like go to, a magazine place and buy like the Texas Saltwater Fishing magazine. I don't even know if it was called that at the time, but, and I always remember seeing these guys just wade fishing in Texas, of holding a lot of these big fish, which is ironic now because I look back and it's like Jesse Arsola and Mike McBride and David, like all these dudes that I've been humbled enough to now call friends. And obviously Jesse has passed, but I say all that to say, like, that bug, man, was bit, I guess like in the late high school, but certainly in my college years. And at that point, once I actually did it, I'm like, I never want to do anything else.
Yeah.
It's just target big fish, man.
When from that point forward, how long till you actually were able to, start fishing in Texas waters more so than, just the imagination of seeing it on magazines and trying to juxtapose it through what you've been able to experience in the Bayou, Louisiana?
Yep. So 9/11 had happened, and that was my first year at LSU. And when 9/11 happened, like I said, I had played baseball. And so I missed kind of the greater call, to serve on a larger team. And when that happened, I was like, you know what, I'm going to serve my country. And so I was fortunate enough when I did commission and become an officer in the Air Force, I was stationed in Korea the first year. So I wasn't even here. And I'm getting to your point, to your question. And so I missed trout fishing a lot. When I came back, I lived in South Carolina, and I lived in Sumter, which is about maybe 2 hours from South Carolina and Charleston. So I fished a lot in Charleston, I fished a lot in Savannah. Not a lot of big fish there. And then my next duty station was Biloxi. And that was the key point, because from that time when I told you, catching some of those big fish, I hadn't started ROTC yet. That kind of prefaced that. And so it had been an awfully long time, but I'd never lost the passion for, just trout fishing in general. When I came and was stationed in Biloxi, that's when I really was still targeting just trout fishing in general, but that's when I changed my mindset of just trying to target big fish. And I did so by walking wading on Highway 90 in the Back Bay, Biloxi, and all that stuff at night in the wintertime. And that's when I finally was able to dial in some patterns and start to kind of understand a little bit more, like I felt like the science in terms of moon phase, water levels, water temperature, which are, for people that target big fish, yeah, it's like duh. But that's when it's like started to kind of all click. And then so I was able to catch quite a few, 5, 6, 7 pound fish. And then I finally capped off my time there with an 8 pounder. And that's when, at the time, I considered getting out and just being a full-time guide. And my wife and I, we had our first son who has hearing loss. And we're like, man, what do we do from a TRICARE perspective and medical insurance and to take care of him? And so we took one more assignment. The assignment was here to San Antonio. Yeah. And so at that point, we lived on the far east side of town over towards Schertz because I was stationed at Randolph. And that was my first introduction to the Texas coast. but I'd still taken everything that I had kind of adopted at, fishing in Biloxi, and I was looking for walk-in wade spots here. And then I was, over the course of time, was able to do that. And inevitably, I think it was my first year is what I caught the one that's behind me. And I was
a behemoth of a fish.
Yeah, she was 30 and a half. And
oh my God, bro.
30 and a half, but she had a 17 and a quarter inch girth. And she was right
absurd.
Right at 11 pounds.
Absurd. I mean, that fish looks so thick.
Yep. And it was amazing because I just walked in, and I'm like, holy smokes. And so at that point, I had started the Speckled Truth.
Really?
Yep. It was 2013 was when we moved here.
Mm-hmm.
I started the Speckled Truth in 2013.
Was there a specific event that was like, hey, I should probably start at least like venting about my passion through this project? Or was there like, what spurred it is what I'm getting at?
Well, I was working on my master's.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was also looking for, I enjoy writing. I told you that before. I really love writing. I'm terrible at it, but I just love the creative outlet. And I appreciate good writing. And
I'm excited to know what you think about my story now.
Dude, the book is phenomenal, by the way. But no, man. So like, I was looking through, when I was targeting those bigger fish in Biloxi and understanding a little bit more like the science behind it. And that's when I just started documenting, kind of not only that process, but then like what that truly made me feel like inside. Because I told you, man, ever since I was a little bitty, I loved it.
Yeah.
And I love the sport. And if you go back and read some, like the very first works, the one that really like kind of springboarded Speckled Truth was called 1 or 100.
Uh-huh.
And I wrote it about my dad, and we fished with McBride down in Port Mansfield. And we fished for 2 days. And to see the utter joy of him holding like a 7-pound fish after he caught it, because again, he's like me. He's caught a ton of fish in his life, but he's never caught, big, true trophy trout. And so to see like the wrinkles just melt away, and see like the excitement that he still has it.
Yeah.
He's 80 years old. I fished with him last week, and I can tell you, I mean, a man, he's far exceeding his own physical ability to go chase something that he loves so much, and he doesn't want to give it up. And I don't want him to give it up, because I know if he does, I mean, that's ultimately potentially his demise. But that's our relationship. That's the relationship we have with this fish, and that's the love that we have for it. And so through those early writings and through the current writings that I do, it's really about molding the two worlds together. There's a technical facet, and then there's just the true passion for it,
like
and
the
love.
Illustrious part of it. Yes.
And so if you can write it enough to where people enjoy writing it and like feel like they're in the waders with you, right? And seeing what you're seeing, putting them in a spot, but then also after they're done, they're like, oh crap, like there's something to, coming into a new moon on a moon over, a moonrise major or something like that. If they can learn something along those lines and connect it to, now we're infusing in getting people to realize that this fish is far more than just a bag of fillets, and that's because, and it's not, I was the biggest meat hauler of them all, but it's really about, and there's so much more value, to appreciating a resource that gives you so much joy, not only with family, but just personally, man. It's gotten me through a lot of dark times that I've encountered in the Air Force, and gave me the headspace to just think about fishing, thinking about targeting a fish. And then, then you talk to guys like Jay Watkins, and we fished with him for 5 days about 3 weeks ago.
Got a lot of love for that guy. He's a badass. Dude,
when he's telling stories, and this is a man who's guided 40 years, he's the trout fishing guide's guide. And he wells up.
He gets into it. He gets visceral with it.
He literally wells up, man, because he loves that fish. And what he says is, when he releases that fish, it's like, for that brief moment in time, our lives were connected.
Yeah.
And I'll probably never see again.
Yeah, I saw that little. He did that film with, who was it?
That was Andrew Foster.
Okay, yeah, that
Real
was
Sportswear.
So the first time I saw that video, I immediately was like, I need to fish with this guy. Like, I need to see what this guy is about. And so that's what spurred me to reach out to him. And I didn't know how to get a hold of him. I sent him like 3 emails, a couple Instagram DMs, and finally we'd set it up. And it was real funny because, and I've said it before on this podcast, but I feel like it's always good to revisit it. But few people talk about how soft-spoken he is in terms of his own way of talking about himself or whatever. And what I mean by that is, so we had gone to the first spot, me, him, and my dad, and I pulled out my fly rod. He knew I was fly fishing, and he didn't say anything. He just hung around, just shooting the shit while I was casting. Caught a couple of fish in the 24-pound or 24-inch range and stuff like that. And then we get to the next spot, and he's like, Andres, like, would you mind if I throw my fly rod? And I was like, no, why would I mind? He goes, well, it's just because I was a little intimidated. You're such a good fly caster. And I said, Jay Watkins, I'm trout fishing with Jay Watkins right now. You think you're intimidated? Like, are you kidding?
Yeah. No kidding, man. He is. I consider myself a pretty good jig fisherman, like throwing soft plastics, just because that's what I grew up doing, fishing Lake Pontchartrain, to Port Sulphur, to Venice, and all these Delacroix. And I mean, a lot of the structure that we fish is deep, 4 to 6, in Lake Pontchartrain, 12 to 15 feet. And you're fishing with current and tide and stuff like that. So I understand like a jig's response when I'm throwing, and how to fish underwater structure, and also too how to work my bait and all that stuff. Man, I fished with him, like I said, a couple weeks ago. He was wearing my ass out. I was standing right next to him like, Jay, I've never had my ass whooped this bad, man. This is ridiculous. And he works a tail like no other. And it's really impressive to fish with him. And he's just an awesome dude on top of that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I totally agree. One of the things I wanted to get into was actually I mentioned the first time you got to, go to the Texas coast. We didn't exactly talk about the obviously that biggest fish. Mm-hmm. I do want to get into that, but before that, I do want to know the first Texas trout you held.
The first Texas trout I held was probably the same place I actually also caught a 30, which is it's right there on Demet Island. Went to the Corpus Naval Air Station, and I was just wading that stretch right by the bomb dump. I think everybody who's listening, trout fishes in Corpus, knows exactly what I'm talking about. And just to wade, it was real clean. It was a bunch of little trout, but towards the end of that wade, that's when I think I caught like one. It was like 21, 22 inches. And that was probably the first Texas trout that I remember catching.
Did it feel different?
It didn't.
Throw it away.
No,
I'm kidding.
Excited about learning new areas, man. I love, that's a thing I love about fishing is, especially here in the Texas coast, is I'm not biased. I'm not from here. When I go to a certain fishery, I don't fish spots. I try to fish conditions, and fish conditions that I can now, reach back to how I fished them in Pascagoula or, Biloxi or Gulfport, to even Charleston and Savannah, in the hard, tides that they have there, to fishing in Jacksonville with Eddie Cabler, and, fishing the Indian River Lagoon. I was stationed at Patrick Air Force Base, which is right outside the Indian River Lagoon. Mm-hmm. So I fished the Banana River, and the IRL, I fished with Doc J. Wright, in the northern Indian.
Oh, you got to spend time with Jay Wright?
I did, yeah. Jay and I, that was a really unique story. Before he broke the 2-pound class with his
new record,
fish,
yeah.
We had fished that week before, and we were supposed to he wanted to fish the southern part of Mosquito Lagoon, which is where I'd kind of fished just coming from Rockledge. But he lives in Windermere, and so we're just kind of meeting at a certain point. And so we launched at New Smyrna. And anyway, we fished kind of the northern parts of the IRL. And anyway, we fished. We had a great day. Caught not a bunch of fish, but we caught some nice fish on top water. And he didn't throw us fly. He's very, 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 very meticulous. Very meticulous on his boat. He's got a little Hell's Bay, and everything has its place. And it's cool because now knowing him and talking to him that was back in 2016, 17, we've been friends since. And we've shared a lot of information, what we found, and, the other data sets that we've collected. He is so data driven, but he's also insanely prepared. So I say all that to say, when we fished together, we had a great day, but it wasn't a phenomenal day, and I had to leave at like 2. We were actually getting ready to PCS, which is move back to Texas. And so I'd had to go back home and help my wife pack and stuff like that. Anyway, he goes and fishes the southern part of Mosquito Lagoon, and he calls me and he's like, I found him. I'm like, sweet. So anyway, a week goes by, not really thinking much about it. And he calls me and he's like, I just want you to know I just broke the record. And I said, are you serious? And he said, yep. He said, I said, how big? He said, like a little over 9 pounds. I think it was 9.1 or 9.2.
It's a big fish, man, especially on 2 pound.
2 pound. Mm-hmm. And it was funny when we were fishing that day, I asked him, I said, Jay, and I think I even asked him in a podcast too. I said, Jay, what's the most revered like speckled trout record that you have? And he's like, it's a 2 pound. I said, why? I'm not a fly fishing guy. And he said, it's because like there are so many things that could absolutely go wrong. That line could,
hit a blade of grass. If
exactly, hit a piece of floating grass and that fish is gone, especially a fish of that caliber. Mm-hmm. And so he said, man, everything just every star has to align. And so when he did it, man, I was like so incredibly excited for him. And then obviously knowing a lot about the IGFA process from him is that it took some time to go ahead and finally get.
It does take a while, yeah. So
when he finally he asked me not to say anything at the time, and I'm sure he shared it with many others, but when it finally came out, I was like, man, I'm so proud of you, And so to this day, man, he's still hard at it, trying to, I think he wants to have every world class or line class record on fly, man. Hey, I think he's got 4.
Yeah, good luck taking that 16 pound record.
Yeah, no, right. Oh, man. God.
It's funny. The more I meet people, the more I realize that there have been bigger fish than the 15.6 caught by Bud. But obviously those are just different times. But it is really remarkable to see those bigger fish that, go up in the 38s and 39s. There's that one picture Mike McBride, or not Mike McBride, someone else had sent Darren Jones when we did the podcast, but it was about a 40-inch fish, and it was like in the 50s, stayed in the 50s, and this chick's wearing like this top hat, and she's just holding it like this, and the girth on that thing, unbelievable. Like it is like,
sure.
It makes you just kind of like sit there in awe. And it's like those fish, like they're real, like they can be real. They're not just a logistical probability. They're real.
Yeah.
It's like, and that's why, again, and I don't want to like, cut through so many things. But that's why a project like Speckled Truth, I think, is so paramount, especially when I'd like to think that these last couple of years we were at quite a significant crossroads as to where the future of the fishery was going to after the freeze in 21.
Yeah, it was in 2017 we started our Dirty 30 program, which is our citation program. In 2018 is when I started the TROT, or the state citation program, which is for fish over 27 inches. I'm showing the stickers for everyone listening. And so I bring that up because what sparked me to start those programs was what was happening in the hot ditch in, I can't remember if it's either Virginia or North Carolina. I don't want to say it's Virginia, but out of the Elizabeth River, there's a place called the Hot Ditch. And the Hot Ditch was basically like a warm water discharge where a lot of these, big fish that would, winter in there, because obviously they have pretty significant harsh conditions in terms of, cold stone events and stuff. And I realized that when I was going through the Virginia citation program, which is, they offer a citation. Basically it's like I think it's like a plaque or like a certificate. And it's for fish over 24 inches. And in the Virginia database, if you look back through in like 2000 and let's say 13 or 14, there were, if I remember right, there were like 300-ish entries into the trout citation program that Virginia had. And if you start looking at the lengths and weights, because they had to be valid, like they had to be brought in and actually be measured and weighed and stuff like that for them to actually then get the citation. It is like staggering the amount of like 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 pound fish that were coming out of that hot ditch. Fast forward, the hot ditch, somebody who's from Virginia will fill in the gaps, basically stopped. They were no longer, discharging warm water out of there. And then on top of that, they had a real bad freeze. And then on top of that, they had a real bad poaching event.
What do you mean poaching event? Like was it a year-long deal? Was it like...
No, it was over the course of like the winter when people were going...
Kind of like what people, because sometimes we'll get away with that at the shipping channel, our ship channel. Yeah, yep. I know what you mean.
People go in there and I think they got busted and they had like a truck bed full of like large trout.
That's fucking disgusting.
I know. So the fast forward to the following year, there were like 12 or 20 entries into the citation program. So I'm like, there are two significant anomalies here that happened for the trout fishery to decline in such a rapid state that frankly, it could happen anywhere.
Yeah. It doesn't, I don't want it to sound, like ghoulish or nihilistic when I say that. Like, I was 100% sure that, not 100%, like damn near sure that there was a high chance that we were going to be just like that. That there was a high chance that the trout fishery was not going to bounce back fast enough to combat either people overkeeping or another freeze or something like that. And it was one of those things where it was like, just got to kind of keep your head down at this point and just take whatever happens. And then Texas had, you really stepped up to the plate with the sunset clause and the keep 3.
Yep.
I don't know how I feel about the 30-inch tag though.
Sure.
What do you think about that?
Well, I want to back up a little bit.
Please.
So with the data that we were starting to capture in 17 all the way through the freeze, that was helpful because after the freeze, and Brett Sweeney and I talked about it in our podcast, is we especially saw it in East Matagorda Bay, which is where they had a significant kill event. And we saw, and obviously they went through a pretty significant heyday themselves, which is we were seeing a lot of fish 27 to 30 inches and above registered and caught out of East Matagorda Bay. And post-freeze, it like crashed.
Yeah.
And so I say all that to say, like, we wanted to start a data set to just have some sort of baseline.
Like a snapshot. Yeah.
Good, bad, or indifferent. And I know it's not a mature data set, but it's something to maybe you can kind of, put your finger on and have a pulse of maybe what's going on. And so now post-freeze 21, we're like, crap, we had a pretty significant kill event. Now we need to, and that was the release 2021 Texas. We did like a little hashtag. We were mailing out stickers. Me and Dave Flatt from Release Over 20 were mailing out stickers to try to encourage anglers to not not like almost like a pledge to like, don't keep any fish. You can keep black drum, redfish, whatever it is. Or if you're going to keep a few, just keep a few. Don't, go back to your meat haul mentality, because if we can lean off the fishery and we can curb the mindset of these anglers, one, we can get through the fish that actually did survive. They can now spawn. And then if we can get through, a really good spawn and have a good spawning class, we can rebound that fishery, especially with the reduction in limit from 5 to 3 that TPWD took in measure. So hopefully we can kind of propel a rebound, for the trout fishing or Texas trout fishing. And it's more about just changing the mindset and the culture. The culture I was brought up, mainly because I didn't know, was a meat haul. Like if it came over the gunnels, it was going in the box, we were filleting it, fish fry that night, giving it to neighbors, X, Y, and Z.
Crisco Bay.
Didn't know any different. And the intent was to just let people that know that there is an alternative. And so the 21 freeze was significant. We saw the effects of that. But on top of that, I think that's what really almost propelled, I think, people's mindsets in terms of taking what they need and release and rest. And so now fast forward to the adoption of going, so it went from 3 to 5 back to 3. I think the majority of the general public was okay with going back to 3 because post-freeze a couple years, we had seen a significant rebound. And I think people want to fish, and I know I do. I mean, shoot, we're seeing it this year in heavy hitters in one of our programs.
Oh yeah.
We've had 5 double digits, man. This year we've had, in the last month and a half, over 75 fish over 7 pounds weighed in and registered. That's in a month and a half.
That's insane, yeah.
In just the Texas coast. Those fish are here. Those fish that maybe were once gone, or maybe those 3s, 4s, and 5s are now 5s, 6s, and 7s.
Yeah.
You know, and I think I would love to fish in a fishery. I think most Texas trout anglers do, you know, enjoy fishing in a fishery that you have a true chance at a giant, man. And so I think we're seeing the fruits of that labor. And I think people are kind of just having a general like mindset. And I think that's elevating or accelerating the rebound of the 21 free. So very long answer to your question, but there's a lot of facets to that. And anyway, very, very minor role. The larger role is the guides adopting in preaching to their clientele, to the recreational guys. It's kind of like, you know what, maybe I don't need to keep all those. And that's really where a lot of the kudos goes in terms of just changing a mindset to fishing. But the 30-inch tag, I'm a little bit of mixed emotion there, mainly because I appreciate that fish.
Totally.
The few that I've caught over 30, they've been special to me. That one, I iced it. I tried so hard, man, to revive that fish. She had a 15-inch trout in her stomach. But my largest fish I've killed, admittedly, the other ones I've been fortunate enough to release. That's just my personal mindset. But I'm not going to chastise anybody who would harvest one to, have that as a memory keepsake when there are also phenomenal alternatives like New Wave Taxidermy or any of those replica mounts, but I don't really see the need, especially if you're going to get a mount, because those mounts are probably better than actual skin mount. But it does give you the option that if you're going to ice a fish, that fish won't kick off, or you didn't do proper fish care, or maybe that fish is just hooked in a really silly spot, right? That you can't really,
it was more
control.
It was more so a question as to your reaction as a Texas decision, not so much as an individual decision going out to keep fish on the tag. One of the reasons why I mentioned it is because like I find myself constantly not knowing how much Texas truly loves its outdoors.
Yeah.
That's what I'm getting at here, because you see the stuff with SpaceX, stuff with LNG, you see the stuff with the Mansfield shipping containers, Lavaca River Dam, and then you have stuff like this, not to mention the alligator gar stuff, which I'm not going to get into, right? But it's a different story. But what I'm getting at is Texas seems to still look at its coastline and its outdoors, its ecosystem as a expendable product, I think. I don't know if maybe this is my personal way I see it. I don't know if you agree with that, or maybe something you can kind of like speak on.
Man, expendable.
Maybe not expendable, but No,
I know I know exactly what you're saying. I will tell you, growing up in Louisiana and fishing, a couple other different fisheries and living there to fish them, I'd probably say Texas is at probably the forefront in terms of
conservation,
putting their wildlife first, or at least, certainly the fisheries, some of their programs that they offer are about taking care of the resource. And plus, in addition to that, their ability to adjust has been far different than many of the other fisheries. The only other place that I've seen adopt measures quickly has been Florida. Louisiana, my home state, and it is an act of Congress. We just changed the limit from 25 to 15.
Really?
And they increased from 12 to 13 inches. And that was a significant emotional event for a lot of my Louisiana brethren over there.
Really?
Yes. But if you grew up there and there's the state of Louisiana map right there. That coastline that I grew up on, a lot of those areas that I fished are gone. The erosion in the southeast Louisiana part of the state, it's awful. I remember playing football on the Rockers Island, which is a little bitty island right outside of Grand Akai, going in towards Barataria Bay, and there was a series of camps that lined it. And man, we used to go there and literally play like football. And that, if you went there now, I don't even know if there's a piling still above water.
Really?
Yes. And so the devastating toll that the coast is undergoing right now, and it's under siege, I don't even recognize it anymore. And I can only imagine, and my dad wells up, man, when he's talking about Louisiana, because, man, a lot of the places that he grew up duck hunting, like in Buras, that he would, take his little boat and paddle his pirogue and set out his, spread and stuff like that, right outside of English Bay. I'll show you on that map, man. It's wide open. It's the Gulf, and so I say all that to say, man, I'm 44. That's like not that old to have an entire fishery decimated.
Completely go away.
And you've had the same measure, like the same creel limits over the course of time. And the wanting to adjust, it just isn't there. It's like, bro, think a little bit more forward. That's where I got to give credit where credit's due. And I enjoy fishing in Texas, because when we did have the freeze in 21, you could see them trying to take measures to, at least take care of a fishery. This past couple snaps that we've had, talking with guys, it sounded like, that was the biggest thing from 21 is, barges running up and down the ICW. It sounded like when we had this, not this past one, but the one right before it where we got really cold and it snowed here a little bit. That was one of the things that I heard from a couple folks, is it didn't seem like the barges were pushing. So I don't know whether that was legislature or, pressure to put on them based off of what's happened previously. But it seemed like there was a little bit more forethought, like, hey, if we allow these, barges to continue pushing, we might have another 21 event, So
interesting.
Yeah.
I forgot who I'd spoken to, but I talked to them about barges and how like barges tend to just like waive off the fee, pay the fee of whatever, like something silly that they might do when they're driving. I would have never guessed that would have been a possibility where they listened to Texas legislature, which is kind of funny to think about when you put it into perspective. Were you gonna say something?
No, I was gonna say, but I mean, like SpaceX and any of the other things that are going on, and that's also, you kind of scratch your head on those a little bit too, because if you coming from Florida on the Florida East Coast, I fished Banana River, where Banana River rolls right into Cape Canaveral. And a lot of those places are off limits, and there's a lot of hazardous waste that goes in there, and it's not good for a resource. And so if you're looking for a test case analysis in terms of of what the negative effects could be, I mean, they're significant, and it's not to say it's decimated, but they've had a significant string of brown tides and stuff that's going on in that, in that Banana River complex in IRL, just because they don't have the water flow, because they, have shut it off due to cruises, or the cruise industry, or now, the space launch industry, stuff like that. So I would like to think there's really smart people thinking about that and having conversations and advocating on our behalf. But I do think Texas, at least in my opinion, in being a transplant, they've taken a better approach in terms of taking care of the fishery.
I mean, I guess I should have prefaced that with saying, like, I definitely need to give credit where credit is due. I mean, the GCCA was its own thing in its own right, which is probably the reason why we still have a fishery to even begin with. And Shannon Tompkins actually mentioned that he thinks that he literally agrees 100% what you just said, that Texas Parks and Wildlife is probably the most responsive in terms of trying to figure things out to better the situation. I just remember, the reason I brought it up is just like, I feel like a 30-inch fish just I don't see why you would even make it like a table fare, or not table fare, but why you give someone the option to, instead of saying, okay, you want a record fish? Okay,
Sure.
fine. Fish over 34 or fish over 32. Yeah. I mean, look at Florida. You $54.50 buys you a tarpon tag for over, I think it's like 80 something inches.
Yep. I would count, and I'm neither way in brutal transparency. I think it's the decision of the member. Mm-hmm. Or the license holder, if you will. Of course, I'm going to try to tell you to release that fish in terms of my own personal approach. But on the same token is, over the course of years, I don't think we've had more than 100 fish, dirty 30s, registered into our program.
Really?
In a year. That they're very, very rare.
Mm-hmm.
Now we can only reach so many people via our social media. So we know we're not reaching every angler. But in addition to that, nor are all people who are catching them reporting them.
Mm-hmm.
But again, we just try to plot that, and it has grown. And then obviously 21, it came crashing down, and then we had a reboot, if you will, and it's kind of coming back up. And all that to say, there's just not a true abundance of 30-inch fish that are being caught. And most of the time, the people that are catching them are truly targeting them. Mm-hmm. And most of the time, the people that are truly targeting them typically have a different mindset in general. I say all that to say, really, the future of a fishery is really that, if you think of it as a bell curve, right? Mm-hmm. Your juveniles, then obviously your very mature fish. Really those prolific spawners, those, let's say 16 to probably 25 inchers, the one that makes up the preponderance of your actual fish population. But aside from that, they spawn a lot more in terms of number of times versus a big, giant female. So, I mean, we talked to Angelo Cepedos on our podcast. He runs the Mississippi Gulf Coast Research Lab trout hatchery there on the Mississippi Gulf Coast. And they try to spawn those fish as much as possibly in a very artificial environment. All that to say is that sometimes when they do reach a mature age, 31, 32 inches, they literally won't spawn anymore. Like they just won't spawn at all. These are just general fish or the hatchery fish that we just mentioned? So the hatchery fish hatchery.
No, so this is the data they collected when they had the hatch. Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, okay, that makes more sense. Yep. So yeah, when they caught when you catch the fish, you bring them in from a certain area to make sure you're capturing the genetics of that area. They bring them in, they spawn those fish, and then over the course of time, they kind of grow them. So they're actually what wild fish brought into a hatchery, then raised in a hatchery environment. And so as they matured, or as some of them matured, not all certainly, but there were some that were, 29 to 31 inches in their hatchery that just wouldn't spawn anymore.
I wonder if those fish got there a little quicker than the others.
They definitely did.
You think that there's a connection there?
100%. And a reason for that is at our boat show, the last one we did, which is in 2020, was right before COVID. Angelos, that was one of our big boat show draws is, we would have a big ass aquarium with a live big trout. And
that's so cool. Yeah. That's so cool.
And it was more, the genesis for that was I'd gone to boat shows growing up and stuff like that. And you'd see these coolers of big dead, trout and stuff like that. And they're amazing to look at. And people are trying to use them to sell, whatever product or whatever. Boards, yeah, which is cool. I understand that. I get it. But I'm like, man, what a more emotional connection would it be, especially as we're talking about targeting big fish and try to take care of them, is to have a live one there to where you can actually see it. So if a kid who's, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, who might be just really ate up with fishing can come and, poke in a glass of an 8-pounder, and that's where you like, man, maybe that one I caught ain't an 8, maybe it's a 5.
Yeah.
And so in 20, Angelos, we called him about a year out, and he said, we have a fish basically in a holding tank for you guys that we're going to hold, that we're going to have on display. And so what we would do is we would buy the booth, we'd run the booth, and the Gulf Coast Research Lab was going to basically manage the fish in the tank and then use that as an ability to talk to anglers as they come up to our booth to get them involved as part of either their tagging program, as part of, bringing in brood stock to the hatchery and stuff like that. So it was kind of a win-win. And so the fish that he brought in, it was like 29 inches. I'll show you a picture. It's wild. It's 29 inches and it was 12 and a half pounds. But that was like I think a 7-year-old fish.
Wow.
And the reason for that is because they simulate growing seasons. So they basically artificially like engineer the trout to think,
it's time for me to grow or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
No
it's time for me
kidding.
to grow, spawn. And so what they'll do is they'll simulate 2 years in 1 year.
How do they do that? Is there
Water temperature and photo period, light availability.
Oh my God. That makes so much sense.
And what they want to do is they want to capture and leverage that fish in terms of its age and ability to produce quickly. Because they don't want that fish to grow old, and then you know, they're trying to take care of it while it's fairly a younger fish, to have that fish spawn as much as possible. And so they would have, and the success rate of their trout hatchery was like 94%. And I asked them, hey man, like how can you tell? And he's basically all the eggs are floating and then all the dead laws would sink. And so they could actually go through and actually count like what the actual success rate of. It's a really like intriguing discussion that we had, but all that to say, man, that's the stuff that we love to learn about. But to your point, a 30-inch fish probably in the wild it's a mature fish. In my opinion, it's earned the right to live.
Yeah, I agree.
But in terms of the longevity of a fishery, I'd rather you personally harvest, let's say a 31 or 32-inch fish and release all the, 21 to, 25-inch fish, because that is like, that's the preponderance of your population. That's the longevity of your fishery.
I've never had anyone explain it like that. And now when you put it like that and you put data behind it, I mean, that tag does make significantly more sense. I came at it more from the angle of it's a Texas trophy fish.
Sure.
Why are you giving it away? Why are you, letting it cease to exist after a certain point because someone was lucky enough to hook it? Yeah. But, honestly, that does make a lot more sense. And then statistically speaking, like, what are the odds that people actually walk away with a 30?
Yeah.
Right?
It's not much.
Yeah.
It's not much. I mean, we're going to see this year, in terms of heavy hitters. Last year, we had quite a few fish that were registered in our program that were over 30.
You think this year's going to be a big year?
I think this year's going to be a huge
really,
year.
really big year.
Because, man, we are seeing just an absolute ton of large fish. And I think it goes back to the right moves that TPWD and others and an angler mindset kind of all came together. We've had fairly mild seasons outside of this year in terms of growing seasons. And so when you take the over 20-inch fish off the chopping block, and then you have a pretty small window and you can only keep 3 versus 5, now I think we're seeing the fruits of that labor in terms of those fish. That were, again, 3, 4s, and 5s are now 5, 6.
They're getting
and
a chance to
7s.
shine, basically.
Yep.
I totally agree.
And so, I mean, that's huge. And then you capture all those genetics, and then it almost just, I want to get back to the time when, Cliff Webb, and I've used that as like the steak. When he was telling me a story, about fishing King Ranch shoreline and when he caught, arguably if you've never had a chance to see that stringer, it's incredible. But it's 10 fish over 10 pounds. And he caught them all in top water. And he was telling the story.
Unreal.
And the only way Cliff Webb can do it, so animated. But he was saying, man, it looked like redfish pushing down King Ranch. They were just huge schools, but they weren't red, it was black.
Yeah.
It wasn't black drum, it was all big ass trout.
Have you ever seen one of those big trout schools before?
I have not.
I've only ever seen one, and I've seen 2 other times where they've been congested in an area, but only one time have I ever seen the school. And you hear it from fly guys. But before I get to that, I wanted to mention that you mentioned having that connection at seeing those fish alive, right, at the fishing show and all this other stuff, right. I'm willing to draw a connection, and this is going to be a little bit of a biased thing, mostly because this is all I know. And one of the things that whenever I try to explain it to some of my conventional friends that wouldn't be, conservation minded, they would kind of scoff at. But one of the things with, I think, fly anglers that they get to kind of understand or kind of have that moment of aha is when they get to see these fish in the wild. One of my favorite examples of this is I spent one of the days that I was filming Madre Padres, which isn't a good video by any stretch of the imagination, but it was the first one. It's really one of the only ones that I've actually completed and actually put out. But it was one of the days where it was like, man, like I know tomorrow's going to be a really good day. And so I told someone to go fishing with me. They ended up oversleeping. I woke up at like 8 a.m. and I was in McAllen and I was like, man, I still got to go. Like I got to do this. I can't not do it. Sprinted downstairs, hooked the boat up and took off. And I got up into this little pond and I was by myself and I just kind of drifted across one way. It was like essentially like slick calm, but drifted across one way, then came back around the other way. And finally, I started to see fish that form up. None of these were trout; these were all redfish, right? But I remember I'd caught like 14 fish by this point, and I put the rod down. I started pulling the skiff, and I was pulling south. And as I'm pulling, you just see so many redfish and how close they let you get, even when they know you're there. It's like the minute you grab a fishing rod, they're on high alert. It's like, whoa, hostile. But before that, they don't care. Yeah. They don't care at all. It's so cool. And I remember very specifically this group of 3, and I'm looking at them. They're on my right side, and the middle one breaks off the group, goes off into like maybe, I don't know, 5 foot away, digs in this grass, kicks its tail up a little bit, then kicks off to the left with its head and meets them right back, and they continue like geeks. And it was like one of those things where it's like, I feel like there's an extremely small percentage of population that will ever experience something like this. And I think that something like this is the reason why you can find the fly fisherman or sight fisherman, better yet, put to be one of the first people to sign their name off on the conservation side of the industry. So that's one of the things I wanted to kind of like agree with you 100% on the fact that when you see those fish and you sit there in awe at the size, it really puts things into perspective. But what was I going to say before that? I mentioned another story. Oh man, I totally forgot. I got way too into that story.
I wanted to ask you, I mean, because looking through your book, man, Laguna, in terms of like that your personal best trout that you were talking, like, was that one you sight fished?
No. I actually, believe it or not, no. I sight fished. I sight fish in the 27s and 28s, and then I've hooked that big one I talked about. But that 30 was more so. It was just screw around fishing. Like it was like it was a slick, calm day, and I was with 2 friends of mine, and they're all conventional bait caster guys. So they're like, Spin's gonna bring the fucking fly rod, like whatever. I don't care. I'm gonna do it. Like it's what I want to do. So I had a 6-weight rod, and the day before I'd gone fishing with them also, and we had stopped by Bass Pro, so I'd ran in and I had bought, I think, some silly fly, some shrimp imitation. It's called like crafty shrimp or something like that. And it was crazy because like there was no gap in the hook. It was like, material hook. And it was like anything that gets hooked by this likely won't stay on. Yeah. And whatever. So we got out there the next day, and I this sounds so cheesy, but I remember taking the turn from McAllen to Harlingen on the expressway. And for some reason, I'm looking out over like the overpass, and I can like just looking in the distance. I'm like, today's the day. Today's the day I catch a big 30. And like in that moment, I remember thinking, like, what if that was actually the case? Like, I literally thought this. Yeah. I was like, well, whatever. We get there, an hour passes, we do the gas thing, and then we get to the ramp and everything, and we go to that first spot, and I get off. I walk off pretty much immediately when we get there. And I'm just casting. I'm just having a good time. And at this point, like, it's probably knee deep. And so I'm just casting at accuracy targets. I'm just practicing my accuracy essentially at about 60 to 70 foot. And this one mullet kind of comes up and over, kicks tail over, and I'm like, okay, boom, hit it. And I start stripping real fast, and something picks it up and drops it. And I'm like, probably nothing. Didn't really grab it with much intention. Kept stripping. I'm like, we're stuck. And like, I started feeling the weight of the fish. And I'm like, oh, it's just a redfish. It pulls off. Still fighting it normally. And then right around, like I fought it. For some reason, it wouldn't come within the 30-foot range. That 30-foot range was so hard to break. You'd get goes and coming back. And finally, we're bringing it close. and Taylor's the one who has the boga on, and Taylor goes, Andres, that's a trout. And I said, shut up. It was Andres, it's a fucking trout. And so he goes up to it, and I'm like, oh my God, that is a trout. Like, that is insane. And so it wasn't one of those things where it's like the pressure's building and the fish is thrashing. No, it was actually very, very scrapped. It was like, oh, like, thank God. But anyway, so he gets that fish, and we weigh it's 9.5, and I'm just sitting there. I'm like, oh my God. I look at the fly. The fly's inside the mouth, but on like the roof, and like it's like the hook is like just barely in there. Yeah. And I'm like, man, like this is it. So we took the pictures, fish swims off, and that was great and all. I didn't catch another fish at all the night, like the rest of the day. I saw tailing fish, I saw everything, and it was like all of my luck right there was in that one fish.
But did you care?
Exactly. The one thing I cared about was honestly like how bad the pictures came out. Like I was like, man, like of all the, like I'm typically the guy who takes good pictures. Like you guys should know already how to take pictures. And they took like 4 or 5, and that was it. And it was like, man, like, oh, that one kind of stung a little bit. But some of in some of the pictures, the fish looks like it's 10.5. Like it looks like it's a stud. Still 9.5 is still pretty big, but that's definitely the story behind that big one. God, it's still killing me. I can't remember what I was gonna say. I was
While you're thinking, that again, going back to, I've been blessed, man, to fish with people that have caught their PBE standing right next to me, and I'll tell you, I mean, I almost yearn for that more than I own like catching my biggest, or bigger fish. Mainly because it's not that I don't get excited. I still do. Still get antsy when they're kind of doing the pinwheel around you, and you're just waiting for that fish to just kind of give its will and finally let you And then obviously those are so critical. Those moments right there. And so, but when you have somebody who has been trying and fishing and really trying to target a PB, and finally when they do, like just to see their emotion gets me fired up.
Oh yeah, but not only that, like now you're part of their life forever, no matter what you do.
Yeah, my buddy Dario Villanueva, he's a I want to say like not a prison guard, but he teaches at a prison. He lives in Beeville, and he was fishing with me, and he ended up catching a 28 in the top water, and I remember him. He's like basically like, that's a big one. I could hear him because I was pretty far away from wading wise. And anyway, like I get over there, and he like, you walk up, he is just shaking, dude, after he landed the fish. And I'm like, congrats, man. He's like, you just hear the quiver in his voice. You could see the excitement, like he didn't care if he caught a damn thing the rest of the day. I'm still looking for a big bite, but I say all that to say, man, it's like those moments, those experiences. If I didn't catch those, fish when I still remember, I close my eyes and still see that water in the green it was in Chelan Pass, and just how gentle those rollers were because of that north wind that was cresting, on that day with my pops, and still seeing, it was funny, man. You'd see that wave just kind of not crest, but like just build a little bit and not
almost
break.
Like half swell.
And that top dog would just dip right behind there, and you'd see, woof, just that toilet bowl flush, and rear back and set the hook as far hard as, as 12-pound Andy monofilament at the time would let you on a little 7-foot, medium, moderate, castaway rod. And man, I can still see it, man, and that is the memory that will live and continues to live. And when I'm old and gray and can't fish anymore and wade a flat, those are the memories that I'll hang on to, because that's the shit I love.
Fuck yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't care about selling a damn thing. I don't care about making a lure. I don't care about any of that stuff, dude. I care about that freaking fish. And if that fish didn't exist, I don't even know if I like fishing, man. I'm serious.
That's fair. Yeah.
I'm serious, because it's just something about it, and that's, I don't know, that's the thing that gets me. Yeah. And that's what I've tried to bridge that gap, to try to teach people this, like, that's that's the shit.
Yeah.
When you can feel that, that's living.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And on a more selfish note, this is something that very few people will probably get to empathize with. You will, people who have podcasts will, but one of the cool things that I understand is like there will be a point where I probably can't fish ever again. And it's really nice to know that I'll have this backlog of conversations that I've had with different folk. And I'm sure you can kind of attest 100%. To the same thing. It's almost like one of those things where it's like, you're not excited for that moment, but you know when that moment comes, it'll be like, man, this is kind of what the effort was for. Now I can go back and just relive the moments that most people probably never have the luxury of reliving, let alone through their own voice or guests or people that they know and love. So just from that part alone, it's from a selfish standpoint, from this anecdotally selfish standpoint, I think that there is a benefit in that. But I also think that from a grander scale, to be able to preserve these stories that, you know, may have been lost through the game of telephone over the years, directly from the horse's mouth, some of the people you've had the luck of being able to sit with. Exactly. Not to mention Scott Murray's note behind you, stuff like that. Like, these are things that I genuinely believe that like are crucial for the prolongation of the fishery, or at least the understanding of the fishery, if that makes any sense.
100%. And when I started the Speckled Truth podcast, that's what I wanted to do, similar to what you're doing, but capture more. Again, we're very niche, man. Mm-hmm. And trout fishing is all I really care about. But like listening to Mike Blackwood mm-hmm. and when the day in which he caught his, you know, at the time state record before Jim Wallace broke it and before Bud Rowland, hearing that story, and then obviously he was there at the very start of GCCA when mm-hmm. and listen, you know, again, I go back to Cliff, you know, his dad was a wildlife agent running off outlaws as they were setting gill nets and trying to get them out. The redfish wars. Yeah. So hearing these stories, I think is, and to your point, preserving these stories, Paul Brown and how he created, you know, arguably the best from a trout fishing perspective, mm-hmm. you know, the best lore, that's so iconic. Mm-hmm. And so all that to say, yeah, if you can capture those, not only does it give a great foundation in terms of where we're at in the fishery and certainly my niche fishery, but also where we could get back to.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
What it was like, you know, hearing Doc McKee talk about, you know, what it was like in the 70s and 80s, you know, again, hearing David Rousey and Jay Watkins and gosh, I know I'm leaving out so many names, but you know, it's important to understand what it was at that time, because if not, it's lost. What we feel like today is a banner day is probably like, back in the 80s and 70s and 80s, you know, Paul Brown was telling me a story after the podcast we did, you know, fishing with Bill Norton, mm-hmm. two legends, you know, if you will.
Yeah, imagine that group of people.
Right? In Mansfield. And the story he was telling me was basically they went fishing and they'd, you know, caught, but there was a norther blowing through. And as they were kind of coming in, they were seeing two commercial guys going out. Mm-hmm. And
I remember what I was going to tell you. Trout schools. Just continue.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. Sorry. Write that down. Oh man, wow. But anyway, so they were like, dude, you know, these two dudes are going out there and, they waited, they didn't see him come back in the next day. And they're like, oh dude, like, and that was a nasty front that just blew through. Uh-huh. Anyway, they go back out there and they're looking for the guys and they ended up finding them. And it was two skiffs basically tethered to each other. And they were like down. They didn't see the guys in there. They didn't see, you know, anybody walking around. And sure enough, they go over there and there's two dudes huddled together in the boat and they're shivering. And, so Bill and Paul, they were telling me like, hey, they were offering him like a thermos, you know, cup of coffee, and the guy couldn't even drink it because his hands were shivering so much. He was like spilling it. But in the other skiff were just fucking magnums, dude, trout. And they were running, I guess, it was like trot lines. I don't know. It was like,
yeah.
And he was telling me that they used to use, it was like a leaf. Yeah, it wasn't even like a lure. It was, I can't remember what leaf it was, but it was like literally a leaf that they would put on the hooks. And I'm like, dude, you know what's wild is in the 70s and 80s, you're talking about catching, let's say 6 to 8 pound trout
on leaves,
on a bare hook with a freaking leaf. And
vegan trout, that is insane.
No, but apparently like whatever the sap was in there, it permeated like some sort of scent. I'll have to ask Steve, and then he'll ask his pops or, but it was wild to hear those stories, but you don't know those stories if they're never told. And then aside from that, how incredible that fishery was back in the 70s and 80s when it was merely untapped. But it's not to say that we couldn't go back there, man.
Yeah, and that's the thing is you're saying merely untapped, but that was in the midst of the trot lines and the nets and everything. Like imagine in the tens.
Yeah, right.
Now
the
that's
Texas Rangers. Yeah.
Okay. So this is the trout stuff. This is schools. Man, I remember I was fishing with my buddy Taylor, actually the one that was put the grip on that big fish, and he had never gone tarpon fishing before. I was like, oh man, like, yeah, like the conditions are great. I'll take you tarpon fishing. Like, what's like, ain't no issue with that. And I had my old Maverick HPXT at the time, and we went out.
Good boat.
I like that thing.
My dad had a Maverick 18 HPX.
Yep. Well, we were out there, and we weren't seeing much. The surf was kind of dead. We'd seen a couple fish out in the distance, and then at one point he hadn't really spent much time with a fly rod, and I had my 10 weight. Well, he actually had gotten the fly line wrapped around the trolling motor, so that line was cooked. I had to go fix that up. That wasn't going to go anywhere, so we were kind of done fly fishing for tarpon anyways. So, you know, I'm like, well, man, let's go to my favorite little redfish spot off by this big little oil line that used to be there. And so we go up. Technically, we go down. We go down all the way through, hook a left at Green Island and go up to where we need to go. And we get there and we start poling a little bit. And in the distance, I see like this group, and I'm like, that's probably like ladyfish or big mullet. We get closer, could be redfish. A little closer, and for some reason, there's a group of about maybe 40 to 50 trout. Everywhere between 21 to about 29. Like you could tell there was significant differences in the way these fish were swimming, but they were swimming in tandem, and they were just kind of moving in a circle, really straight. And I've never ever seen that in my life. And so I had Taylor throw in there a couple times. He hooked some fish between 21 and 24. Never really got in front of the big ones, or if they did, they just wouldn't eat it. But it was one of those things where I went back, I called Tim, called Rick, and I told him, I was like, yeah, we've seen that before, but it's rare. It is rare, let alone on the sand, of all things, on the sand.
Same.
The other few times I've seen him is up on some of the spoils, and it's very rare. It was actually around the time where we still had that big group of snook before the freeze that used to get found in the rattlesnake area. But it was around that, and I mean, you see some of these fish laid up, and it's like, how are you even real? Mm-hmm. Have any of the bigger ones, like I guess like 27s and over, have you seen them eat the lure before, like sight fish?
I've never sight fished
really
ever.
That's a Superior bucket list.
100%.
Bucket list.
100% it's a bucket list item for sure. I've seen big fish, seen big trout more specifically. The first time I ever saw one on a flat was in the Banana River just south of Pineda Causeway. And these trout were using these mangroves like a little highway. And I looked, and it looked like a black drum. And I'm just sitting there. I had a little Ranger Banshee Extreme, and I'm just like posted up. I'm like just kind of studying it. And then all of a sudden I see 2 or 3 others come out of the mangroves and like join them, and then they start cruising. And man, I mean, that's the thing about Florida. They're so like line shy. Like as soon as like I clip, yeah, like engage my reel and click the button, they're gone. Yeah. And so I'm like, okay, I'm gonna come back here at night. I did. I went back and never caught them. And then the other one I was fishing just north of East Cut with Mike, actually way north of East Cut. It was with Mike. And we're on sand, as you would imagine. And so I did see a couple of black drum cruising. I ended up sight fishing those and catching them. It was real fun. And then all of a sudden I see one who was like coming right towards me. I thought it was a black drum again, man. And I flipped to it, and it just kept moving, like coming right to me. It was like, I didn't see that lure. I don't care about it. And I reel back in, I flip at it again. as almost like same thing. It didn't even like stop or nothing. It just kept cruising. And as it like came, is from like me to the door, which is probably about 10, 15 feet. I was like, oh my gosh, that is
You see like the width on the shoulders.
Trout. And I mean, I flipped at it and it was like, I could have hit it in the side and it probably would have just like, you know, pumped one time and glided, you know, but like it wasn't fazed by me. It wasn't eaten.
Glide is a good word to use. That's what they do.
Yep.
They definitely glide. One of my favorite stories about big trout, and I've had a couple, but I was guiding this kid, Alex Lazinski, and I'd like to venture enough to say that, like, you know, we kind of try to show him the ropes. I'm not exactly a prodigy, but he's a kid that I would take out because I see myself in that kid's energy. And I don't see that often. And I'm like, I don't want to, I'm only here because guys like Larry, Tim, and Rick gave me time and gave me an ability to kind of, you know, get to where I am. And so it's like, I want to do the same for this kid. But so I'd taken him out fishing in 2023. And he, at the time, I was like, man, like, you gotta see these big trout. Like, you just don't understand it. He was like, I don't really want to. Like, I want to look at redfish. Let's go catch redfish. I was like, all right, sure. Okay, fine. And so on the second or third day, we had gone up we went pretty north. From South Padre anyways, we were in Payton's area, and the water was so low that the dead middle, it's typically like 2 foot, 2.5 foot, was like almost like, I don't know, 6-7 inches. And so we pushed back all the way up north and we're pulling the boat, and I tie this deer hair crab fly for no reason. I just like the way redfish kind of blow up on it. But I had this deer crab fly, and we're looking at this, what we thought was a redfish, start swimming towards the boat, and he throws at this fish, and this fish kind of like kicks off, but it's still early. You can't see it real well. Finally, it gets up to the boat, and it's a big fish. It wasn't huge. It was like 27, 28. But I looked at Alex and I was like, you into it yet? He goes, no. I was like, ugh. So I was like, you know what? Switch that fly just in case there's another one. So we switched over to this fly that I designed with Tim O'Brien and who is it? And Hunts and Lau. And it's a very similar just to a normal slider, but it's just on a bend back and certain different things that I genuinely prefer for these fish, at least sight fishing them anyways. And so, you know, the next fish we saw, I mean, this fish gave us a beautiful broadside shot, probably 26, up on the front at around 11:30. Kid lays up a fly where it needs to be, strips it up, and all of a sudden, like, the fish goes from just docile to just like, literally just like that, and like everything kind of like settles. The fish kind of takes off, and his line never went tight. And this kid turns around and looks at me. He goes, "I get it now."
They are violent, man. They're savage.
I mean, yeah, we got 15 shots at those big fish over the course of like 4 days, and on the last one we got that 28. And it was funny because, I mean, we'd broken a rod casting at one, which was the rod's fault. Maven. Anyways, so we had broken a rod, and we had just beat ourselves up for these fish. And one day we had gone tarpon fishing, and this kid failed to mention to me that he got seasick. And I was like, are you kidding me? Like, we're out here on the surf, like bobbing and weaving through these rollers, or not rollers, but these waves. And so we turn back in. I get in the car. We drive down to the arroyo, launch again, and we get a couple shots of some fish. And we go to the spot where Bud caught the record. So I go down there. It's my favorite spot to fish now, especially with the way that the erosion has affected some of the area. So we come around the bend on the inside, and we had seen 2 fish. First fish off the grass line, off the shore, didn't really give us much of a shot, but it was still a good fish, 26. And then out of nowhere, I just said, man, like, I don't know why. And this is something that I've never really do. Like, I know Jay Watkins specifically mentioned it before. It's like, if you think you're too shallow, go shallower. But a lot of the time, the fish that I have seen have not really been on the edge. And I guess when he said it, he just meant in general, like, you know, knee deep to shin deep, you know, not exactly, you know, go to the absolute edge. Okay. Well, I kind of about 45, 50 foot off the edge, and out of nowhere, this fish that I'd seen earlier just kind of floats up in this pothole. And I'm like, Alex, there's your fish. And throws one shot, slow strip, slow strip, slow strip, and that fish just, it was cool. What I love about these fish is when they see the fly, it's almost like their eyes like lock in. Like that's when you know you got the bite. It's not the reaction. It's like when you see their eyes go, boom, that's it. And so I throws this fish, bum, 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 bum. And then the fish looks up and boom, eats it. And it was one of those things where it was like everything had come together. And I just had a brand new net. So it was like a 70-inch net. I could reach over and grab it with no problem. But we were stoked. We were amped. And he was in the video, he releases, he turns around all overjoyed. And it was like, that is what I wanted for you. That is what I wanted for you. And you got it. Like, you know what it's like. And that's something that Tim O'Brien worked for a long time to get for me to happen for me anyways. Yeah. It was those little things. It's like, you don't like those little moments make the effort so much more worth it. And I definitely 100%, Liz, your homework. You need to see one of those things eat.
I would love to. So if you're offering, I would.
I mean, I don't know if I can find them. We could try.
Oh man. Yeah, they're just, if for nothing else, man, just to observe them. They're awesome. I mean, I catch them in, deeper water. Certainly Baffin is really kind of my area of where I fish a lot of. And so, it's a little bit more of a deeper water complex, comparatively speaking. I love Port Mansfield. I fish down there a couple times a year, but really Baffin is my jam. There's a mystique about that place, man. I absolutely love. And it's just cool to hear just the stories about it. The rocks have their own kind of uniqueness to it. Yeah, it's cool when you launch and it's kind of foggy and a little overcast. You can almost like look in the banks and see those trout fishing legends, man, just looking over you. Like this is the joint. I feel that it's kind of weird.
It's not weird.
Sometimes just feel that kind of aura about that place, man. And that's what kind of gets me going back there every time.
Yeah.
Just because it's literally, I don't catch very many redfish back there, which I'm totally fine with.
Do you know guys who consistently hit redfish in the area? Like this is a big trout spot?
Yeah. I mean, I know there's, the big monsters, that are 50 inchers or 40 inchers or whatever it is that you see. And I've never caught one. I've caught a few reds, I've probably caught more black drum than I've actually caught redfish and Baffin. But yeah, in terms of, I could probably count on my fingers and toes how many redfish I've caught in Baffin for sure. And I fished a lot of grass,
Yeah.
I just don't really do it.
Yeah.
So, and I'm okay with that. I used to tournament redfish as well. And it was more just getting back to the competitive edge of things, playing baseball and stuff. And I liked it, but I would always go trout fishing, pre-fishing for redfish tournaments. And my tournament partner, Brandon Treadaway, he'd be like, bro, we have to go look for these things. I'm like, we're almost done. We're almost done. We got 10 more,
That's my issue when I pre-fish is like, I'm like, man, nice conditions. Like, let me go look for some trout. Like
it was, man, oh gosh. Yeah. It's funny. When IFA championship, it was out of Bayou Bienvenue and we'd pre-fish for like 4 straight days. In advance, I had a little yellowfin YF-17. I was on a little skiff, and we got on stage. I think we ended up like in 12th after the second day. And so the guy, it was the IFA Redfish Championship, and we had made the money and all that stuff. And he was asking Brandon, he's like, so tell us about your pre-fish routine. He's like, well, Chris, he would have to go catch a limit of trout every day before, and he's like, y'all went trout fishing. Yep. I'm like. So at the end of it, I told Brandon, I'm like, hey man, I can't do it anymore. I like fishing with you, but I don't like red fishing. Yeah. I don't know. It's just like I said, man, if trout didn't exist, I don't even know if I'd like fishing, not even bass fishing so I just I liked watching them eat. That was pretty cool. But I liked probably at that time more the competitive side of fishing than anything, of just being excited, like, oh my God, we caught a 7.5 pounder. Like, oh, we got 15 pounds, and like that type of stuff. But now it's such a, different world than what, we still had the ladders on the boat, step ladders on the boat. And Yeah, it was fun. It was fun, but if I never caught another redfish in my life, I'd be okay.
Yeah.
So I'm not mad at it.
One of the things I want to ask you is I'm looking around this room and there's a lot of, I think memorabilia is the wrong word, but like, a lot of interesting pieces given to you by some very influential people. Is there one of these things that reaches out the most to you and like,
Probably the one right here.
The
Paul Brown. Yeah, it's a Corky. You can see it. It's in its original packaging. It's signed, and the other two broke back and a bug eye are there. And if there's a picture that was taken, actually Bruce Ball took the picture, and I'm huddling over Paul as he's like telling me about that particular one. It's with the black gill. And he was showing me, and the reason that resonates with me is, one, it's not only just Paul Brown, and it was literally in his hands, and that's one of his lures that he gave me when I did the podcast with him. But if you go back to that picture, you can kind of look at him and you can kind of see him like looking at it. And I can only imagine, and he's not a very emotional guy, but I can only imagine that, because I even asked him, I'm like, what's it like creating like the most iconic trout fishing lure?
Yeah.
That has this cult like following X, Y, and Z. Like, it's not my lure. It's the lure that has been made by the Texas anglers that I just gathered feedback. I was just the hands that made it, but they're the ones that gave me the ideas. And so I can only imagine at that moment that he's thinking, looking back, that, yeah, that's either connected me to so many people, forged relationships, all that stuff, man. And I don't know. So I'm like, that's probably the one that means the most. And then the other one, like I said, is that stained glass. That was really cool. And from a friend of mine who was kind of battling sobriety. And as he was coming out of, he's getting back into trout fishing, and it's kind of like not stained glass, but it's kind of colored glass that he put, and that just showed up on my doorstep one day.
Oh, it's beautiful.
It was cool, man. So that it meant a lot, just because it meant a lot to him to overcome a life challenge, and that life challenge I've seen in my military career take a lot of people out of the fight in terms of military, and just because a lot of people have been in a lot of different situations over the course of time, and so they battle those demons every day in different ways, and some of them have done that through drugs, alcohol, whatever. And so to acknowledge that you have a problem and overcome that, that's enormous. And the fact that it was trout fishing makes it even more cooler, in the fact that, he connected me somehow.
Yeah, you feel like you were an influence in that.
Yeah, right. That's hopefully a cool thing, though, where, he is a better person, a better man, maybe a better father because of that. So those are the two I think that mean the most. And obviously L. Scott Murray, that floater diver. There's a lot, but that was a really cool one. The first time I ever met Scott Murray was I was invited by David Bjork, who was the president or soon to be president of the Ananias Fishing Club. Have you heard of that?
No, I've never heard of the Ananias Fishing Club.
Oh, super cool. That was the first time I met Mike Blackwood as well. And dude, David's a longtime follower of Speckled Truth, and he invited me. He's like, hey, come do this talk at the Ananias Fishing Club. And it was in Corpus. And sure enough, I have pictures. Yes, Blackwood and Scott Murray and a few others. I can't remember. Yeah, they're in my Scott's book. And I'm giving this talk about Speckled Truth. And I'd had to show up in my uniform because I was hustling to get out of the city. And man, they took me in. And so just got a chance to meet and know Scott and how passionate he was in terms of baffin. And now, through the Heart Research Institute, they have like the Bring Baffin Back, and, in terms of water quality and stuff like that. And so it was random, man. It just showed up in my mailbox one day, and it was this floater diver and a handwritten note from Scott, just basically saying, hey man, I appreciate the kind words and keep doing what you're doing. And when you get that level of feedback over the course of, my life, and it's really just something I'd be doing anyway, but the fact that it means so much to other people,
let alone someone who is so influential in the space in their own right.
Yeah, absolutely. And they acknowledge that, man, it's inspiring.
Oh, absolutely.
So Those would probably be the three, I guess.
Yeah. One of the things I wanted to ask, and I feel like you might have an interesting take on it. Granted, it's something that I've brought up multiple times, but it's the plague and this. What would you call it? The not the like the savior, but like it's the plague and also the solution of social media. When you look at social media a lot of the time, and I haven't brought it up recently because I feel like I'd brought it up quite a few times in previous episodes, but I feel like you, again, since you've built something through it, I feel like you have an interesting take on it. I look at it and I see a project like yours with substantial following and stuff like that. And it's like, this is kind of what it is meant to do. Like, I am all for it. But then at the same time, you also see like a lot of promulgation of not bad actors, but, you know, silly action stuff like, hey man, maybe you shouldn't do that, especially if you want to be a conservation mindset person. And I'm not talking about anyone in specific,
Sure.
But I would like to take your view on that, on social media and what it poses for the future of the fishery.
The social media, as you've heard many times, and probably everybody who's answered this question has said it's a blessing and a curse. It truly is. It's a blessing because, it gives you an opportunity to go ahead and reach people through a click of a button versus the distribution of a magazine or something along those lines, right? And through traditional print media. And it allows you to reach people that are that would far exceed your traditional means of, again, not advertising, but print media. So the curse, though, is, and the unfortunate reality is, we are, at least myself, I've said it enough, man. I love this fishery. I love this damn fish. And so I think the purity and intent of what we're trying to provide anglers, which is an alternative to taking care of a fishery, or at least a different mindset, is good. And it's never wavered. The sad reality is not everybody shares that. And or also they will give you the optic that they care about that to promote their own personal brand. That
was going to be my follow-up. Yeah.
And I like relationships. I love talking to people.
Clearly,
I'm a blue 4 lenses guy, right?
Uh-huh.
That's my primary color, and I just love hearing people's stories, and so I get invested in the relationships. When in fact, at the end of it, it's really just a business transaction to promote their own personal brand and not take care of the fishery, which is not what I'm centered on, and that hurts.
Yeah. And
so I've met a lot of people, and I've lost a lot of quote unquote friends over the course of time that are no longer, anyway, that you could kind of understand that was the case. Also too, you know, it's a great way to educate people. I know we were talking a little bit about that, which is, you know, you'd see people, you can use it as a talking point. And so people would send in, you know, pictures for us to share on our stories or, you know, on our posts. And we like to have, you know, really like good quality photos, you know, and somebody will send one in and, you know, their fingers are through the gills and they've asked, hey, why won't you share my picture? And I'll tell them straight up, hey, I can't share that picture. In addition to that, I don't know if you listened to the podcast we did with Dr. Greg Stuns, but you know, out of the 90 and 10, the 90 that survive catch and release and the 10 that don't, almost 100% of those are through some sort of like gill trauma. So just be mindful about where you're putting your hand placement. And so you can kind of use that. Oftentimes they'll call you an asshole, but oftentimes they'll be like, hey man, I appreciate it. And
you
so to
damn
try to get
tree
better.
hugger telling me how to hold my fish.
No, and it's not.
I'm playing. I know.
Yeah,
I'm kidding.
It's definitely not with that intent in any way, shape, or form. But it's like, it's, I don't know, just trying to use it as a, I guess, a medium to talk about that. And in the ones that typically are like chastising you, you can like, oh man, you're just trying to use as, you know, personal brand development or growth or whatever it is. And anyway, but I go back to my original point, which is that the hard part is the relationships I've created and have had that just haven't been centered on taking care of the fishery, which is the whole reason I started this. I could literally go away tomorrow and I'd still be doing the same thing. I love writing about it. I love living it. I love literally night prep before launching the boat, the ride out there, like just taking in everything. It's what I've done since I was a child.
Yeah.
And I'm 44 and I'm still doing it and I still get excited about it every single day. And I share my pops the same sentiment, which is he's 80 years old and he can't sleep the night before because he's going trout fishing. And it's literally that, man. So that's the blessing and the curse of social media. But I felt like we've navigated it in a good way.
Especially now. Totally agree with you.
But, I've just tried to stay consistent in terms of like just being, just trying to be consistent and be real, you know? So.
Do you think that, and no, actually I'll preface a question then ask. So one of the things that really bothered me after the freeze, after the regulations were going from 3 to 5 before they went from 5 to 3 again, was all the guides that come out and, sign their name on never keeping another trout. And I'm saying a lot of them were like, never keep another trout again. #Texas, #Texas strong, or whatever the hell they were talking about. Well, I'll give you your mic time in a minute, Lucy. Don't worry.
I know.
They were all for it. And then the minute those regulations got reversed, it was like stringer pick, table pick. And it was like, what I was going to ask was, do you think that a lot of that at least some of the people that, had a good head on their shoulders noticed who were quote unquote bad actors or people acting in what we just talked about in a self-preservative kind of mindset?
If there were a guide,
Like, can I rephrase the question?
Sure.
Do you think in that community of peers, those people kind of showed their true colors and kind of, put a mark on themselves as a person? Or do you think that kind of just was like, whatever, he was just doing it to do it, he's good now?
No, I think they had good intent for the most part, the majority of them. But again, I go back to, if they were a guide, I can understand, like once the limits came up, maybe they saw, they didn't sell as many trips. And I mean, that's their livelihood. So I can understand the wavering there. I don't agree with it. But I'm not in the business of selling trips,
Yeah, I know.
So I can understand that. Now, the recreational guy who's like a weekend warrior like me, who went immediately back to, catching, killing and being a meat hauler or whatever it is. I mean, that's a little bit more of like maybe pandering to the greater community. I would like to think that, because I saw a lot of people, when we sent out those stickers and stuff after the freeze, reverse, to some extent their tone. And that's cool. I get it. But I also saw a lot of people stick with it. And I'm to the point now in my life where I can't worry too much about the people.
It's hard.
That don't.
It is hard.
It's really the people that are trying to do the right thing. That's the people that earn more of our energy, I think, than others that don't. So again, I'm not mad either way. It's just the way I've always equated this, and this is going to sound really stupid, but in the Air Force, there was this stuff. It was this training. It was called Red Dot training, and it was for sexual assault. But I'm like in there, and this is at Patrick, by the way, when I was at Florida, and I'm like, this concept is actually relatively genius, and it's nothing like earth shattering. But in short, you have these bad actors, which are red dots. And if you can identify these red dots through some sort of like personal behavior or, behavior out in public or whatever it is, but bottom line is they're bad actors, if you will. And so you'd have red dots, almost like a heat map. And if you can create and facilitate a culture that's almost counter to a red dot behavior, then they're called green dots.
Like herd immunity.
Yeah. And so what happens is ultimately the red dots, and through the cultural embrace of certain mindsets, starts to kind of interweave itself and then overshadow the red dot behavior. And I was like, man, that's actually a really good way of thinking about, really taking care of a trout fishery is that, yeah, you have some people that are going to be meat haulers and that have grown up that way, just like I did. And if they're old, young, or, new to fishing, that's agnostic to me. The point being is, if it's sustainable in the fishery, that could, and you're still continuing to do it, that could be a red dot behavior. And hopefully over the course of time, if we can change a cultural mind shift of taking what you need and releasing the rest, that is really what hopefully will overshadow these, individual bad actors agnostic to state or fishery. Right. And so having people think for themselves is a pretty
daunting task.
It's not that hard, but
No.
it's easy to be swayed one way or the other. And so back to your question is, whether they change or not after the freeze, it's irrelevant to me. I'm hoping that more changed, to the green dot, if you will, or in a positive
green
mindset
dots in general.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, maybe fast forward 20 years, I don't certainly hope we're not a catch and release fishery. Actually, I would like to see the fact that we don't have a regulation at all.
That would be nice.
Because we could actually take care of our own fishery. Because I'm not a huge advocate of regulation.
Overreach. Yep.
Sheesh.
Just like Darren.
So if we can just take care of it ourselves and let government do other government things, and we've built that culture to where we want to have people that want to come to Texas because they have 8 to 10 pound fish and they have a clear shot. I would imagine that's good for guide business. That would be good for the economy. That would be good for recreational guys and use of the resource. And it's all built off the backs of people that have tried to do the right thing over the course of time.
Yeah, I completely agree. Have you already told the story of that 33? I feel like we haven't. I feel like we've brushed over it twice, and I said I want to talk about it later.
Sure. Man, that's probably one of my...
Don't say least significant fish.
No, it's not the most significant 30.
I want you to get there, but that was my follow-up. I want you to talk about 33 first.
All right, so this is... So she was only 30 and a half.
Oh, I thought it was 33.
No, my longest was 32 and a half. But that's not it. That's just a 30 and a half.
It just looks monstrous. Yeah, I don't know why I thought it was 33. Okay.
But it was awesome. I had fished in Corpus at another spot, and I had basically fished to the bite fizzled out. I went to this spot, and I had walked it in November and December 3 separate times, and I found a little isolated shell patch. And it wasn't very big, maybe the size of our living room. It wasn't very large, but it was basically almost surrounded. 3 sides of it were surrounded by grass, and it came off a little ledge and in a little bowl. And so I wade fished it in November, December, like 3 separate times, and didn't have a bite. And so after I was done, this was in April, I had fished a certain area, and I'm like, man, I don't want to drive back to San Antonio yet. So let me go hit this area. The water had come up probably about a foot from the times in which I'd fished it in past. And so I knew it was there. So I'm like, let me just fish it. So I was throwing a 6.5 medium light castaway wader special with the old Abu Revo SX. And
Damn,
at the time,
I missed those reels.
I was still, man, at the time I was still throwing 17 pound true fluoro. Like I hadn't thrown braid for very long. And so I was throwing, I'm looking for it. It's a she-dog.
Is it yellow with the black body?
No, it's not that one. It's a she-dog, but it's a bone colored she-dog, and it's up there. And
I'm going to pretend like I see it. Oh, it's right there.
Oh, it's right there.
I think I actually do see it in the left corner.
Oh, yeah, there it is. With the orange shade.
I got it.
That's a good call. And so, man, I'm working the top water, just trying to cover some ground. And it was awesome, man. It wasn't like an explosion or anything. It was like a
just gulp.
Yep. And it was gone. And I mean, I reared back, and I still have the rod. My wife has been like, why are you keeping this rod? I'm like, this is the one I caught my biggest trout on. But I've pulled, oh my God, we call it the willow stick. I mean, this thing is so flimsy. It's certainly not one you want to throw top water on. Man, freaking reared back in that thing. And when I did, the fish, it was awesome because when she came up, you know, with her chin towards me and she was shaking her head, and those gills, I'd never seen it before. Obviously, they were so, the head in this fish was enormous, and she was so fat that she couldn't come out of the water. So when she shook twice, she basically just like fell backwards. And I was like, oh my God. And so like I remember like walking, I didn't have a weight belt or I didn't have a boga grip. I didn't have a net, nothing. So I'm like, I'm gonna just get her to the nearest shore. So man, it was like slimy, grassy. I'm slipping, falling. And finally, like she tried to make one more like last ditch surge because she knew she was getting shallower. And I'm just like, oh my God, like knees were shaking, like saying prayers. Like finally, man, everything that rod had, I just yanked her up on the bank. And I remember just standing over there and I'm like, oh my God, that thing is huge. And it wasn't the length, but it was the girth, how tall it was.
Yeah.
And I'm like, good God. So like I literally ran with, you know, my finger like underneath her gill plate back to my truck, which was probably like, I don't know, maybe 200 meters. Not crazy far, but far enough. And I'm running, and it was like a random Wednesday. And I put her in, I had a old Chevy Silverado, and I put her back there, and I just so happened to have a seamstress tape, and I took the measurement of her, and I sat in the side of the road, man. Like after I like took a picture, just sitting on my phone, and I tried to release her, and she wouldn't kick off. Clearly, it was so ill prepared. So finally, I drove down. I was like, I'm just harvest her. I mean, she's not kicking off. Every time I release her, I feel like she would kick. She would just go belly up and she would just die. So I'm like, I'm just going to harvest her. And so I drove down the street a little bit, and there was this another guy. He was like fishing, and I'm like, hey man, you mind taking my picture? And he's like, sure. He's like, what you got? I was like, I got a big trout. And he was like, holy crap.
It's like, oh, it's a big trout, the 25, and then you pull it out.
So I sent my dad a text, and I said, I just sent him the picture. He said, nice fish. And I was like, I said, 11 pounds. And man, my phone, he's like, what? And so I took it back home. We lived on Randolph Air Force Base. I went to the HEB, which is on Kitty Hawk Road, and I got it weighed.
You got it weighed there?
Yep.
Wow.
Yep. And I got it weighed. And then it's funny because Mason, my middle son, he's 12 now. He was standing next to it, and it was taller. And he was. Yeah.
Really?
Yep. And it was right outside. It's one of those like, that's going to be a great old ass picture.
Oh, for sure.
Because I'm holding it up next to my son, and like he's, you know, just 2, and it's taller than he is. And so that was one that, so anyway, I filleted the fish, and then it has a 15-inch trout in its stomach. I'm like, holy smokes, no wonder why this thing was so heavy. So it's probably like a 8.5, which is most.
Still, man, that
what
thing
most 30-inch fish are, but you throw, you know, 2 pounds in there of an actual trout. Other fish.
Technically, it's all trout.
Man, it was wild. Certainly the girth of that thing. I'll show you a picture of it.
I want to see it
on the tailgate. I mean, you could just see whoop. Wild, crazy fish. But
and that significant one?
Yeah, the significant one was only a 7.55 30-inch fish.
Really?
Snake.
Skinny.
Yeah. That was fishing with my oldest son, Ramsey, and we had gone down to stay on Corpus Christi Naval Air Station and just do a little primitive camp session. And we had camped out there, and we just walked in, waited to that spot I was telling you before. And it was just me and him, and he sat in this room, and he's 15 now, and we would mail out dirty 30 boxes, and he would help me. Cause at the time I was writing down everybody's address and
doing it by hand,
writing envelopes by hand, and he would stuff them for me. And so he knew a lot about the Dirty 30 program, not because of any fish that he had seen
from the behind the scenes acts and stuff like that. Yeah.
He has been, an incredible part of like Speckled Truth in terms of our Dirty 30 program. So we're fishing, man, and we're catching these little that really weren't catching anything. Anyway, I was throwing a Ned rig, little old Ned rig, a freshwater Ned rig. And we just started catching like 12, 13-inch fish. We were having a great time, man, just being a father and son. And then towards the end of the wade, all of a sudden, man, boom, and thought it was another 12-incher, rear back, set the hook. And when she came up and shook, I remember Ramsey, he was like, "That's a 30, Dad." And he was screaming it. And I said, "No, it's not." And I'm starting to get a little nervous, man.
No,
This is a big fish.
Stop talking, son.
Yeah. So I'm like, he's like, "That's it." Like he was so animated and so excited. And yeah, man, I landed the fish. He took a picture and, we released it. And it was really, really cool because when we released it, she was just lumbering off the flat and the water was clear. And he was on one side and I was on the other, man. We just walked her off the ledge.
That's so cool.
It was, what an awesome thing. And then to kind of throw it all on top of that, my dear friend, Ann Taylor, who was the wife of Tony Taylor, she's passed away now. She, really asked me about writing for Louisiana Sportsman, and I wrote for them for a couple of years. And she had just battled cancer, and she had just passed away. And it was kind of a tribute to her. So there's a lot of emotion going on in that moment. One being with my son, but also two, like thinking about Miss Ann and her battle with cancer. And it was almost like her, like going to heaven.
You walked through, walked through the ledge.
It was a very special fish, and it certainly didn't weigh the most, but that's one that probably is the most meaningful.
Absolutely. It's funny. The few people that I know that have, done this to an extremely, not professional, but extremely like addicted degree, have a lot of those like, coming to something spiritual or coming to God moments through trout. Bud Rowland has a really cool story, and he was funny. Like he lets this fish go. It was like a 36-inch fish, or 36 or 34, one or the other.
Yeah.
And he says that fish just stayed there with him while he was waiting. And he was funny, the way he said it was like, he was like, "Well, Andre, it was almost like that fish was like, 'Thanks, bud. Thanks for letting me go.'" And it was, those things, it's like, man, like imagine having that moment with a fish that's like a moment that you tend to typically have with other human beings. Like that's probably one of the most sobering or cementing moments in reality, which is probably a reason why guys who find themselves in the position like your friend who did the painted glass or the stained glass can actually find sobriety through something like this, because it gives them like a bigger call, a bigger drive. So yeah, totally agree. One of the things, if you haven't listened to that episode, I said suggest you should. You have? If anything, I was going to say I think you and Bud would have a great conversation too. I think you can ask a lot of really good questions that you would get a lot of cool stuff out of Bud. And I can give you that contact if you need it. If you don't, then no big deal. But
yeah, we're going to crank up our podcast. I was deployed this past year, and so coming back, we would try to get it going again. And it, as you know, it takes a lot of effort. And so I'm trying to retire, and obviously was clearly deployed. And so it was, thankfully I do have another core group of guys. Kyle Johnson, he's a charter captain out of Mississippi. He's kept the lights on while I was deployed, and certainly been a huge advocate.
I feel like I spoke to him
cementing person in Speckled Truth's growth and all that stuff. And then Edward Crum is the other guy. He's also in Biloxi as well. And that's really us three as a triad. But there's so many other people behind the scenes that kind of make this thing work. But it's really unique to have that kind of brotherhood. But you said it right there, man, which is the spiritual moments. And I think that's why I can't wait to go back.
Yeah.
Is I've sat in church pews, and my wife and I are very spiritual and very, I think, connected in our faith and have a good faith relationship. But I find true peace out there.
Yeah.
And I find where I'm maybe closest to a higher being, closest to God, immersed, watching everything in kind of the earth evolve, and just kind of exist. And it's awesome to think that I'm just merely a speck in that in that entire environment. And I'm just so blessed enough, man, to where I can actually enjoy it and participate in it. And it's only fitting that try to do what I can to ensure that others have that same opportunity.
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely.
Been in parts of the world where that's not the case.
Yep, I can imagine. Well, I don't know if you'll believe this, but we removed the first 2 minutes, right, of the sound check, right? But we did cross 2 minutes and 2 hours, or 2 hours and 2 minutes right now.
Are you serious?
I'm looking at the number right now.
Damn.
It's easy when you can just talk, man.
Yeah, I guess, yeah.
Wow, man, I'm trying to think of one more good question to ask you before we do the closeout. I asked my last 2 questions. Is there anything that you want to talk about?
No, not really. Thanks again, man, for just giving me the opportunity to be a part of it.
Oh, absolutely.
There's nothing that, like I said in the beginning.
Okay, fine. Actually, since you're going to go there, and I don't want you to go there, but you went there. So before we do the last 2 questions, I want you to give me maybe your top 5, top 10 folk that employ true Texan values with this fishery and this species. And then if you can, I'd like for you to tell me exactly what they do that makes them, such a good proponent of the space.
Sure. Number 1, Dr. David McKee. Have you ever talked to him?
No, sir.
Incredible. He is, I think he has the most world-renowned lore collection of bingo and plug-in shorties. And so he is an enormous resource for lore development and the stories that he has. And he has an incredible tackle collection from primitive to throughout the course of time. Mm-hmm. Aside from that, he taught at Texas A&M Corpus Christi, and he can tell you stories about this coast from a scientific lens that you never thought was the case. So, and then not only that, but Dr. David McKee is probably the coolest person, legit, I know.
Really?
He is the coolest dude. He lives right there in Corpus. You can almost see Corpus Christi Bay from his house. Dr. David McKee, 1.
Okay, and take note of that one.
Yeah. 2, obviously, Jay is an enormous advocate for this fishery and the passion that he has for the resources. Nobody can exceed that.
I totally agree.
3, if you haven't had a chance to talk to Cliff Webb, I've mentioned him a number of times.
You mentioned him. I was going to try to look into him after this.
Sweet, merciful crap, man. The energy that this man has in terms of fishing or in terms of, for trout fishing, especially in the Baffin area and up at Laguna Madre, he has incredible stories. And like I said, his dad was a game warden through the Redfish Wars and just a true resource for this fishery. 4 would probably be Mr. Lowell Odom. He owns Texas Custom Lures and Custom Corky. Mm-hmm. It's funny because him and Jay are like lifelong friends and they have that brother relationship. But also too, Lowell guided for many, many years there in the Rockport area. And so getting his take on and he loves to tarpon fish. He loves to do now he does all that stuff, but he's been a huge advocate for us here. And so let's say he's just an awesome resource and can kind of tell you he's lived through the freezes in the 80s and beyond. And he's a true resource as well. Mm-hmm. And then last would probably be Mike McBride.
Yeah. There's a small 10% chance I get to record one with him next week.
Okay.
We've been working on it for like a year and a half already trying to get this set up.
Dude, I know. Yeah. Anyway.
I know it'll be worth it. I want him to talk about Beast of Legend so bad, man.
Beast of Legend is an awesome story. And he's a character. Oh, certainly.
The harmonica?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. The infamous harmonica. But that he's been a huge help for me in terms of my writing style.
Really? Oh, that's actually really cool. That's actually really cool to have almost would you say he's more of a mentor, someone like a peer that you can kind of bounce ideas off of and take notes from?
I wish he would write a book about trout fishing just because the way in which he writes about trout fishing is the only other person that's really captured the reader, at least me as a reader, has been Flip Pallet.
Really?
Reading stuff from Flip, listening to his narrative. He's truly the reason I love writing the way I do, because it's very modeled after Flip. And then Mike McBride throws a little bit of a different wrinkle into there, to where, man, they can put you right smack dab in that situation as if you'd been there all day. And when people can do that through written word, where you actually have to read it, and in your mind you're soft to that space where you're there, that's talent. And I think Flip and Mike do that very well. So to hear him tell those stories and why he wrote them, they're really cool. Pillars of Coal was the other one.
Pillars of Coal
that he wrote about. It's called Pillars of Coal and Beasts of Legend and many others. Ice Plant Perspectives are another one. But Pillars of Coal, he tells a story, and if you're going to record it, you'll probably hear it again. I'm sorry, but in a much more animated way that Mike can only do that. But when they went into these coal mines, and it's obviously a much grander thing, right? But when they went in these coal mines, basically they would harvest the majority of the coal, but leave these pillars, these support pillars.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens is they would find these, ribs of, coal that are in there, and they would keep harvesting. And finally, the only thing that's left to harvest is the pillars. And then once they would harvest the pillars, and
everything comes down,
that mine is done. And so what he was trying to tie that to is, have we harvested enough to where now we're harvesting the pillars of coal?
What a good analogy.
Yep.
Huh. Wow. I mean, that makes total sense, and it ties a lot into Jay's whole like, you don't kill your deer that you stalk. You don't kill your spikes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Huh, that's interesting.
But that's my 5.
Good. I'm glad you gave me those 5. You had those off the jump too. That a lot of people, when they get put on the spot, even if they know their shit, they tend to freeze. But that's how I know that you know your shit really, really well. I mean, it just shows who you are, which is awesome. It's funny. I feel like I knew we were going to have a good conversation, especially because, you know how to do stuff like this. But I did not expect to walk away, feeling a lot more understanding from a fishery that I thought I understood already. So that's on a selfish note. I'm really glad I did this.
Thanks, man.
With that being said, this has been awesome. I got 2 questions I ask, and then we'll do the goodbye or whatever. The first question is, looking back at everything you've done through your career as an outdoorsman, if you will, is there anything you wish you would have done differently? And you can use the word regret if you want. I tend to stay away from it because it can be something as simple as a timeline change, or it could be a regret.
In brutal transparency, no.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad I lived, with my pops, and I'm glad we harvested the way we did.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like Speckled Truth is that byproduct of living through that. And so I don't regret harvesting the thousands of trout that we've harvested, because I feel like, one, it's not only cemented memories that are going to live between me and Pops, which is an important relationship, but on top of that, it's I think the world needs a few more people that are empathetic.
Interesting.
And I think when you can understand when people that are screaming, "Hey, I don't want the ability to take and harvest fish away," I can understand that. I was that person, and I'm certainly not that person that wants to do that. Again, all I'm trying to do is tell you from the other side of things is that it's not bad either.
Yeah.
And you have to sometimes live through that to have the credibility. I certainly don't think I do, but to have the credibility to not chastise people, but be empathetic to what they're feeling. And maybe that is the talking point of maybe getting them to finally, come over.
Interesting. You're a better man than I am, though. on Facebook, man, I don't care. I'll chastise someone.
Yeah, no.
It goes, sometimes I try, and I mean, I've tried, I remember I used like data from Scott L. Murray's book, and I've sent it over to people who are like,
sure,
I'm not reading that. And it's like, why did I put in the effort? Like, you know what I mean? So on that note, like I've tried, so I commend you for, consistently doing that. But with that being said, the last question I like to ask is almost as if you're talking to like your kids in 4 years or some of their peers when they're kind of getting into when you would call like an industry age of the space. But yeah, talking to the next generation of kids who maybe want to be outdoorsmen, maybe want to be in the industry, or maybe they just find a passion for it. What is a piece of advice you'd give them going into that?
Make sure you have your own personal principles and values and have those on lock. Because if you don't, people will sway you. And the way I feel about that is when I came into it, I feel like I had a pretty good understanding of who I was as a person, and the values and principles, like integrity is high for me. I love purity. I love grace. And there are some other things in there. But I say all that to say, being comfortable with yourself, you have to understand that and then stick to those principles, because people will try to pull you multiple different ways to either for their own benefit or for to get you out of whatever it is that you want to create.
Funk. Yeah.
Yep. And so I've been there a couple times, mainly because, again, I trust people inherently. And so when I've seen those relationships dissolve, it's crushing to the point where there's been times I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore because I don't want to get hurt again.
Yeah.
And I say all that to say, if you're coming into it new, and understand who you are, have your values and your principles on lock, because at some point somebody's going to make you question whether or not that's really what your intent is. Because I've heard a lot of people say that they love it. No, man, like you look at a dude like Jay, and I feel like myself from my pops, freaking love trout fishing. And some people do it for a paycheck. And some people say they love it. And then when it's blowing 30 and it's cold, and we're the ones who are, putting another dip in and just head down, throwing the Sims on and like just grinding, waiting for that next bite. And, you got a leaky left knee in the waders, and you finally get that bite and you finally land that fish, and that's what it was all worth. And the dudes that don't love it, they pack it in.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm talking about. And when the weather's good and everything's solid, yeah, they'll love it then. But
it's like, are you willing to bleed for it?
No, it's not that. But like, if people in this industry, it's been eye opening.
Yeah,
that people will make you question whether or not you love it, or
I guess that goes to all facets of this industry. I mean, you see it in the fly industry, you see it in guiding and non-guiding, again in rec. I mean, yeah, I agree. You can kind of tell. Sometimes I'm not gonna lie. Sometimes I'll be the one who stays in when it's blowing 30. It depends on the day. I'm not gonna lie to you. It's a little harder when you're in a polar skiff. I'm not gonna lie to you, Chris. Though, don't judge me on that one.
I fish out of a 17-foot backcountry flats. But now I will say this: if it's blowing like 20 out of the north and I launch at Coffer, and I'm fishing South Shoreline, we're packing it in. Because that is gonna be a rough ride. And yeah, in a little 17-foot flats boat, but no, yeah, it's just it's a labor of love, man.
Yep, good way to put it.
Yep,
that's probably want to call this one labor of love. Yep. Well, with that being said, Chris, this has been awesome. I know that you and I had talked about doing something like this about a year ago or 2 years ago, or a year ago before you shipped off, right?
That's right.
Almost a year ago to the day, right?
Absolutely.
That's actually really funny.
Yep.
I didn't think we were going to do it so quickly after like me like reaching out to you, and I'm glad that we did. I have a bunch of these on lock right now on episodes that I've done, but it's nice to already know that this one's done because I've wanted to do it for a while, and I've wanted your take on a couple of the things that we talked about today. So this has just been overall, even on a selfish note, this has been super, super awesome that we finally got to do this. with that being said, if there's anything else you want to say, have it said now. If not, forever hold your peace until your next podcast episode.
Good to go, man. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
And thanks for the book, brother.
Bro, absolutely, man. With that being said, got nothing else to do except get on out of here.
Let's get it.
Cool.